Welcome to Michigan Reimagined, presented by Good Marketing and Wagoner Financial. And here's your host, Chris Buck.
All right, I've had a couple of shows about AI, artificial intelligence, and I'm really excited about today's show because AI is not just for business solution answers. My next guest, private investor and community builder David Silva Smith, uses it to surface high-leverage questions about himself, turning reflection into action, how to be a better father, a better partner, clear actions to try. I'm grateful to have Dave here in studio to share his experience with us. Welcome back to the show. Dave, you've been on a couple times.
Thank you, Chris. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm fascinated as I prepared for this conversation because, again, I think the world is rushing to learn how to use AI as an efficiency shortcut, for business problems and how to, get policies created and creating web and blog posts and, the first 80% at least until they refine it more tightly and stuff. But you've been using AI for personal improvement and enrichment. So talk to me a little bit about how you kind of started that process and what are some of the ways and consistent questions that you ask AI to help you better yourself?
Yeah, I think this started a few months ago, and I was just thinking, usually I use AI, like you said, preparing for this show, for example, asking it specific questions, getting specific answers. But then I thought, well, AI knows a lot about me. What if I ask it, what questions should I ask you? So I'm asking the AI, what questions should I ask you to learn more about myself? And I was just blown away, Chris. It popped out, maybe 10 or 15 questions, and I was like, ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's a good one. So I just copied and pasted some of those questions, not knowing what would happen, into AI.
And then put it back to it.
Put it back to it, and just really was blown away by, the insights I was getting about myself.
So talk to me about maybe your first or most impactful revelation, what was one of the things you're like, whoa, okay, that's pretty cool. And then you put it back. Like, what was that question that sparked it all?
One of the most impactful was AI told me that I was intense. When I get into activities, I'm intense about them. And it talked about the problems that can create for people in my life, like my wife and my son. It can be challenging to be involved in an activity that's supposed to be fun, and the intensity can really hurt, or intensity can hurt in various relationship discussions, things like that. And I'd never thought of myself as intense, but when I saw that through AI, it gave me a whole new way to see my interactions with my, closest people in my life.
Right on. Okay. So, you talked a little bit about the questions the other questions that kind of came up, and there were some of that are how to do certain things that you're always going to be doing better. And then certain things maybe that you aren't doing that you should start doing, and certain things that you are doing that you should stop doing. Right. I mean, is that so? If you want to pick maybe a couple of things, what are some of the prompts that you gave it that really gave you additional insight as to how you behave and maybe how to make modifications?
Yeah, so, asking it that question, what question should I ask you to understand myself better? Just recently, one of the things that I've had trouble with is connecting deeply with people. And so then it said that I should reach out to people who I want to connect with more. And so I said, okay, how do I do that? I asked AI, and it immediately gives me like 4 different techniques. And I thought, okay, the first 3 aren't for me, but the 4th one is. And so I reached out to somebody I think it was last week, and said, you probably don't know it, but you have changed my path. Hope you're doing well. And the guy immediately responds back, oh my gosh, so nice to, hear from you, what a surprise. And so now we're deepening our relationship there.
Got it. Okay. And so you talk about an energy map.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about what the energy map is and what it means to you. So
the energy map, this was a question that popped up from the question again, what are questions I should ask you to understand myself better? And it let me see, where is that energy map? Okay. So it said I should ask ChatGPT, what situations predictably increase my energy, which drain it, and what's the earliest cue? So I was thinking, sometimes the past few months, I have felt exhausted, and it'd be nice to not feel exhausted. So then I thought maybe, for some people, they might just be able to figure out, like, I like this, I like that. For me, it was helpful to have AI, look through my calendar, know what it knows about me, and find areas that it thinks can help my energy and not help my energy. And it produced this really cool matrix. I wish I had a copy of it that I could show you, but it also gave me cues to look into myself to see, like, how do I feel after this activity or that activity? So then I can, categorize these things as energy drainers or energy givers. And it produced a very constructive conversation with my wife so that we could think about, the upcoming weeks and how to have, better energy for me. And, happy wife, happy life, but also happy husband, happy life.
Right. So it seems like, ChatGPT would need to give you things to help you assess what gives and takes away energy, right? I mean, I know you are a big AI user and ChatGPT user, so it knows you, like I understand, and maybe some people that are listening don't know that. ChatGPT is not, or any of the AI platforms, is my understanding is that it learns you better and better and better the more you use it.
Exactly.
It's not just in a vacuum where if I say, write me a resume, and then I go to another platform and say, write me a resume, and they're all going to kind of come up with generally the same thing. It'll understand over time how you think and how you refine and what speech patterns you prefer and behaviors you do. So I say all of that just to kind of make sure everyone's following along. But when you say go through my calendar and tell me what things are on my calendar that give me energy and take away energy, does ChatGPT, which is your chosen platform, know you well enough to give you an answer to that? Or does it say, look at these things and determine, because I don't know, what does give you energy and what doesn't give you energy? And then with your response to that question, then I can help you kind of filter this out and advise you.
Yeah, you're hitting on a good thing, Chris. So I've been using it for years, and it learns me. And sometimes I'm just shocked at the things it knows about me. I'm a techie, so I've looked into the memory.
Right.
And I don't know how it knows some things about me that I don't think my best friend would know. But, I talk to it all the time, and maybe people aren't as, unique snowflakes as we think. And maybe it's just like, oh, hey, there's like 1,000 other Daves that are very similar and that it's aggregating, or people who have, these 10 characteristics also have, these
right.
other 10 characteristics. It's very fascinating. There was a particular issue that's kind of embarrassing to talk about, but I have this drive to spend time with high-powered people. So, a month ago, we just had a baby girl, August 14th, Ariana. She's beautiful. And like a month after that, I was going to this conference in California. And I'm thinking, why am I leaving my family? That's my stated number one priority to go out to this conference and interact with people who, the good chance I'll never see them again. I'm not going to invite them over for the weekend because they live across the country. And I felt like weird about it and trying to figure that out. So I asked ChatGPT, and it said that I was looking for an unmet need with them. And I don't think I have it printed out here, but it described the things that I was looking for there, and then described ways that I could interact with my family. To see, hey, if we try these things, then maybe I won't feel this desire, to go to the coasts and interact with these people. And I just thought, like, wow. Because I talked about that particular issue with my wife and some of my friends, and we didn't really have any good answers. And ChatGPT, like you're saying, just had this insight, into me, and I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So did it tell you to avoid that type of a trip in favor of family time? Or because you set it up talking about wanting to be around high-powered people because that feeds your energy. Kind of close the loop on all of that. Did you go and talk about the high-powered people and the energy you feed from that versus time away from your family, which are certainly high-powered and important people in your life too? So talk about the balance of that.
Yeah, I did go. I don't think ChatGPT told me don't go. I think it likes to do what you want and be subservient in that way. I do have an interesting default prompt that asks for a contrarian perspective. So, if I do ask it, hey, should I go here? It would also list out, here's 10 reasons you should go, and the contrarian perspective why you shouldn't go. And I did go on the trip, and I enjoyed a lot of aspects of it, but I also did think about, my family back home and kind of got excited, to see them again. So it was nice in that way.
You shared a little off mic before we got started that, this sounds like ChatGPT has kind of become a confidant of yours, a kind of a neutral resource that tells you kind of what you need to hear. It's a cross between a best friend and a therapist, maybe, that is always available, that you're not paying, a fee for or spending the specific, allotted time for. It's kind of an on-demand, proof of your, your planning.
It's
right?
on demand 24/7. And I think one of the coolest things is I've been in therapy for years. And actually, a therapist I had recently was annoying that she was constantly late, and it bothered me. But, we built up a rapport over a couple of years. And so sometimes she should provide insights. So I was like, wow, geez, I can't really get rid of her because, it doesn't really matter how late she is. She's got enough to start with somebody new and build it up. But like you said, ChatGPT just knows me just from being helpful throughout the day. And so one of the coolest things about these questions is I don't have to do any additional work. It's just immediately getting value right away by typing in these simple questions.
Right on. Well, I want to give a nod to our friends at Wagner Financial. Whether you're just starting out planning for retirement or anywhere in between, Wagner is here to help you make smart financial decisions. They offer comprehensive, customized planning from investment strategies and tax solutions to insurance, accounting, and estate planning. Wagner is dedicated to supporting you, your family, your business, and your future. Using their unique team approach, their team members' specializations ensure that you have someone who will have an answer to your questions and is ready to help. Schedule a consultation by visiting wagner-financial.com or give them a call at 517-853-3367. So we've been talking exclusively about ChatGPT. I know there are other competing platforms out there. What is it that makes ChatGPT your platform of choice?
Just my history with it. So I'm getting all this value from it. And so actually there was a better model I started using, I think in February, maybe when Grok launched. But I realized when I use Grok, I've got to put in a bunch of context. So, and I don't like putting a bunch of context. I like to just ask the question, what should I do this weekend? Or how can I be a better husband? How can I be a better father? And just have it spit out stuff. So ChatGPT knows me and is able to give those great answers. Grok at the time might have been able to give me better answers, if I gave it a whole book long about my life. But I don't want to sit there for 5 hours and type in all this stuff. And so I decided at that point that I was just going to use ChatGPT until something it'd have to be way better. Because otherwise I'm losing out on the efficiencies and having to type in so much stuff. Right.
No, that makes sense. You talked a little bit about how ChatGPT and AI has kind of trained you maybe to avoid certain behaviors. So you talked about the energy depletion, but wasted activities maybe, or I forget how you phrased it, but I think it was kind of, give me 3 things I should chop out of my weekly routine or my monthly routine that aren't bearing the fruit, or however you might have worded that. Talk to me about some of those aha moments.
Yeah, that was a real aha moment. Actually, I was preparing for this interview, I think, on Friday morning, and...
Stop doing podcasts. Was that one of them? Hopefully not.
But, and actually, that's a great thing, too. Preparing for this podcast, I was like, wow, this is a real nugget here. It was saying, you look for things to cut out, and that's the highest leverage activity, because then it's increasing your focus. And it talked about having only 2 big things that you're working on at a time. I don't know about you, but I've got this to-do list, that just keeps growing and growing and growing, and things get pushed off of it. And that just is like this mental weight on me. And so I've been thinking about this idea, what can I cut out? How can I have, a limited amount of space to, really focus on the things that are important? And I think that's the huge idea that's really going to bear fruit, maybe for the rest of my life.
Got it. Yeah, I had that epiphany. I didn't use AI for it. I used an old school textbook or a book, Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McEwen. I had a milestone birthday coming up, and I kind of did a self-assessment and just said, am I where I want to be? I've done a lot of stuff, and I'm trying to do things that are passion projects for me, but I feel like I'm doing too many things in a minimal level. And the message behind that book is really do a few things exceedingly well, and the art of saying no. And if you're a high performer, you're going to be asked regularly to do more, and you got to figure out how to only chase the things that are super important to you, that kind of stuff.
See, Chris, this is why you're a better human than me, because you can just figure it out. I need help with ChatGPT, or if somebody asks me, how do you feel? I'm like, let me check my ring. Oh, how do I feel? Did I sleep well last night? Other people are just like, well, you can just answer the question. You can just know how you feel.
I feel good, or I don't feel good. Got it. Okay. I like this one. It talked about fearless feedback. What feedback would my closest partner or team give me with 0 repercussions? Talk about what that means to you and what kind of feedback did you get? I'm assuming you asked that prompt.
I did ask that prompt. And I honestly, I think the results of that one were a little bit, more disappointing than I was hoping. I was hoping to get some real zingers in there. But it worked from the perspective of my wife, my son, some of my friends. I think it was around, my calendaring and like surprising them with things, changing things up a day of, not being present in the moment. It produced good conversation with my wife, because, she was like, oh, hey, these things don't fit, these fit. I think one interesting thing that came from that particular question when I asked it was saying that my wife valued stability and predictability. And
that ain't you. From what I know, I'm just teasing.
but I think a lot of these things, even if it's wrong in some cases, because especially when it's speculating, on somebody else who's, not only not me, but, somebody close to me. So I think as it gets farther away from me, it has more trouble. But I feel like they're just great questions to, open up these conversations, with my wife and like, oh, I never thought about that. I never thought about that.
Right. And again, these are always conversation starters and ways to air things out, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that ChatGPT is the judge and jury and you just have to do what the answer is. It starts a conversation that you might not otherwise have because an idea has been pushed into your head.
Yeah.
I'm
starts the conversation, it starts the thoughts.
I mean, I'm fortunate enough to know your wife. Mm-hmm. And I mean, stability and predictability, I get the concepts behind that, but she's also an adventurous person who wants to go live on life's edge, right? So you can air that out a little bit. ChatGPT might have given you kind of more of a finite answer that starts a conversation, and you probably end up at a different place than what the prompt probably already told you. So no, that makes sense.
In our wedding vows, I said, I don't know, we weren't made for the simple life was in there. It's a quote from a song that she likes.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense to me. All right. Another thing that I think is fascinating, you talk about future life. Hey, talk about the prompt, but it's like, when I'm 80, what would my 80-year-old self thank me for starting this month? I think was the way you prompted that. What kind of results would that get you?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be different for everyone. So this is where the benefit of having a history with your AI, search, your tool that gets to know you, so it can give you some real feedback.
Yeah, I think this one it was saying be kinder to yourself. Don't push yourself so hard. Chill out. Don't always be striving and driving. I think the answer was around that perspective, which it is feedback I've gotten quite frequently.
Right on. Want to tip the cap to my friend at Kirk Byron State Farm Insurance. Today's podcast is sponsored by our good friends at the Kirk Byron State Farm Insurance Agency. Their mission is to put the customer first when helping them plan for the risks of everyday life, to prepare for the unexpected, and to realize their financial goals. Kirk and his team build value and confidence in your auto, home, life, health, business insurance, and financial service needs. Kirk is always looking for opportunities to help customers in mid-Michigan and around the country. Everyone has insurance needs, and you do well by contacting Kirk Byron State Farm Agency and hear what their experts have to say. You can get in touch with them by calling 517-349-3830 or look them up at sfbyrons.com. You will not regret it. So there was an interesting prompt that you showed me that was about an identity check. Where is my identity? I'm the kind of person who blank, protect me. What's limiting me? I feel like I don't need you to bare your soul because that can be private, right? I mean, there's a lot of things about your, anyone's personalities and stuff, but that's a bold question to ask. Are you willing to share any kind of feedback that it gave you on that particular question?
Yeah, so I think on this one of the things is I always say that I'm, family first, health second, and then fitting in social, and then work just kind of fits in the cracks. And so it, looked at my calendar and it was like, oh man, you've been, busy with your baby, busy with your son, got some other things going on that I'd rather not talk about, some legal issues. And it said, you've been neglecting your health. And I was like, yeah, I've pitched out all my health routines. I had some good health routines, walking in the morning, drinking a gallon of water, playing basketball a couple times a week, and yeah, all those things just like went out the window. Sleep, and I was just thinking like, oh my, how does it know this? I never told it. Hey,
right.
I'm not. I don't remember telling it that, but somehow it just like knew. And I don't know exactly what to do about it other than like, oh yeah, I want to get back into work on that. But it's amazing to have that insight, and I love having. It's like a best friend, like where you can have blind spots and not see them, and so it's really great to have ChatGPT be able to point those things out. 'Cause sometimes I already know it, and sometimes I don't know it. Like that, like cutting things out. Like, oh yeah, what should I cut out? Only having two big priorities that I'm working on. Those I think are fascinating ideas.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. And you're right. It is kind of scary that it knows that, right? Yeah. I mean, it doesn't know whether you played maybe it's on your calendar and then it fell off your calendar. Like there was this basketball thing that I know is exercise or but it doesn't know your sleep habits and those kinds of things. So
yeah,
that's
well,
fascinating.
that's another funny thing too. Is I want to pump more stuff into it. I want to pump in more and more data so it can get more accurate. And,
Right.
and then I wonder, where does that lead? 10 years from now, 15 years from now, if it's sucking in everything that I can possibly give it, or maybe it's even in my glasses or contacts and taking in everything, and my
Right.
ears and all of that. How spooky will that be?
Are you bullish on that?
Am I bullish on that that's going to happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I think it's going to be a very interesting, time period we're living through. I wasn't, around during the industrialization era, but I feel like AI is just sweeping over and, changing society very, very rapidly.
Yeah.
It looks like robots are coming. Like last week I was on a thread and people are like pre-ordering, robots that it can, live in your house and, load, 3 items into a dishwasher in 5 minutes and, go fetch you a glass of water in a minute and 10 seconds. But, these are version 1 products.
Right.
After a year, after 5 years. I don't know if you remember where AI was at, a year or two ago with video. It was very, very janky and, now it's producing stuff that's indistinguishable from reality. And it just is going to keep getting better and better.
Yeah. It's a little scary. So I'm going to leave it to smarter people than me to play the controls on that. I'm a kind of a secondary adopter and that kind of stuff. It's part of my age bracket, I think. But I'm glad that people like you are out there kind of proofing it because you can be my shortcut. Hey, Dave, tell me about how I should use this better. One thing I'd like to kind of chat about as we kind of start getting closer to the finish line here is being wrong. One of your prompt was, what am I wrong about now? Talk a little bit about what prompted you to ask that question, and you wrote down 3 bets and disconfirming tests. Share with us a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, so I like when I think that can be the most useful is when somebody can point out where my thinking is wrong or change my mind on something. And so I asked it this question. Geez, I don't know why I didn't write down the answers ahead. And Julie was right there with me. And so I thought that it was wrong about 2 things that I was wrong about. Because I'm like, no, I'm right about that. And then I'm like, man, Julie, am I just egotistical? But the third one, I was like, am I wrong about that one? So it probably doesn't do very well for the audience to not have the exact examples.
No, that's okay.
But yeah, I think it's very very useful to have somebody who can tell you you're wrong. And actually, now that I think back about some of these questions where I was a little bit disappointed in the answers that it gave me, I probably should have told it, hey, push harder on me. Act like a jerk. Act like somebody who hates me or something like that. Like what would
Because you can talk about.
they say?
You can give it those kinds of prompts, and it'll respond to that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I've got a coworker who was really angry with a supplier, and he wrote out an email to them exactly the way he wanted to say it, and then he dumped it into AI and just said, "Say this only nicer or more professionally." And it came back with, just different language that he needed in order to keep that relationship.
Oh man, I love that. And I used it recently, interacting with somebody that I have difficulty and have had difficulty with interacting with for like 15 years. And we always get into this thing of, trying to give reasons and it just goes back and forth. And it said, hey, you're putting these hooks in there. And it's just things to disagree. And I was like, oh, what are hooks? And so it just said like every reason I'm providing is just something for somebody to dig into and disagree with. And so then instead of, writing multiple paragraphs, I just did a very short, like 2-sentence response. And that was the end of the conversation. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I'd known this 10 years ago.
Right. Excellent. We've got a couple of minutes left. I know you brought in some notes. How would you like to close out the show? What kinds of topics have you prepared for? What kind of thoughts do you have that you want to kind of round around? I know I went through some of the things that I prepared based on some of the information you gave me, but there are probably some holes in the questions that I've asked. Well, how would you like to kind of wrap this up?
I want to beg to your listeners out there, please give this a try. I see so many people, I don't know why they're afraid to type into AI and just give it a try. And what I'd like you to do is just find 2 minutes in your day and ask your favorite AI, what are questions I should ask you to understand myself better? And I hope, I think that it will provide a list of things and look through the list, find one that jumps out at you, and then copy that question and paste it in and see what happens.
Right on. And so do you take the initial response and copy and paste it into like a OneNote or a Word doc or something like that, just to art? Like, again, I'm not all that fluid on all of this. I use it here and there to help me draft things, and then I can refine it instead of staring at a blank cursor. But is it part of a long feed that you can go back and find? Like when you do that initial thing, what kinds of things should I ask you? And it gives you 25 different questions. How do you save that somewhere to go back and maybe you copy one of those every day.
I can copy it out. Sometimes I do copy out like ones that I really want to like work through. That I'm like, oh hey, I only had 2 minutes to do this. The tip, I don't have hours to work through this, because I think some of these things could really be half-day sessions or something to really like dig into your into your life and into your soul. So some I do save out, but most of them I just copy and paste it into a chat window, and kind of like AI slop. That's probably a lot of the reason I don't remember some of these things, is because it's like, oh, we had a 5-minute conversation about this thing versus working through it with a therapist. Maybe it would have taken an hour or a month, 4 sessions, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And then for the listeners out there who are concerned about kind of privacy, right? And my understanding is ChatGPT, like the content of that is searchable, right? It is not proprietary or so I was told anyway to be cautious about.
I think everybody has to take their own view on it. There's definitely a risk when anything you put in there, it can show up in court, can be hacked and leaked, and who knows what. So the safest thing is not to use it, not to put anything in there. But on the downside of that, then you lose the conveniences of AI.
Right.
So, just like Google searches, sometimes you see these murder shows and people are, searching, how do I dispose of a body, a week before their lover, dies. So it's in the, and I just tell my son, anything that's in a computer, people can find it out. But for me, I value the convenience a lot. So, if somebody wants to, and actually I've been hacked and people have looked at my emails and they're like, gosh, this is some boring stuff.
Right on. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, we've been talking about how to use AI for completely different reasons than probably 95% of the public is using them for. And I just thought it was a fascinating topic to kind of hear about how you can use that to refine your own habits and your own basics and to be introspective and learn how to be a better person. So I think that's fantastic. We've been talking to one of our good friends, a private investor and community builder, an entrepreneur of all types, David Silva Smith. Thanks for chatting about your personal experience with AI and ChatGPT.
Thanks, Chris.
Appreciate it. And I'd like to close by giving a final shout out to all my loyal sponsors: Wagoner Financial, Good Marketing, Triterra Environmental, Keller Williams Advantage and Team, Michigan Rise, Kirk Byron State Farm, and the attorneys at Foster Swift. They're all fantastic people that are worth the call. And if you found the show as a one-off, I want to remind you to follow and subscribe to Michigan Reimagine on YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and pretty much anywhere you find your podcasts. This is Chris Buck signing off for Michigan Reimagined.